Hey guys, this is Strength of a Dragon here. I'm doing a video on what I call the art of landing abilities. I've got two clips here to help explain some points I have and give examples, but jumping right into it, the art of landing abilities comes down to, almost exclusively, looking for and recognizing setup. Setup, as we're going to see here real quick, can be as blatant as Athena taunt. It can also be something like Sikkim to set up for Crush. It's a classic combo. Typically, combos involve some form of setup. And then there's a couple other forms of setup that made landing that ult a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and pause as we get to the next one that I really like to highlight. Right here, Stealth goes up in his ult, but his setup is gone. So he's looking for more setup, and the next bit of setup he gets is right here. Don't want to say the wrong name. Kanye Life, ults. Geb ult roots you in place. He's not a super mobile god, and outside of his one, so in combat he's not very mobile. He ults, that is the instant go button for Stealth to know, oh, as long as I drop this pretty much on top of him, I've landed it, free and clear. So as soon as Kanye Life ults, Kanye gave what I call self-CC to MLC Stealth, which is where you CC yourself, something like an Anubis one, where you are rooted in place, or Gebel, rooted in place, things like that. You can be CC immune and still be providing setup for the enemy team. And then we have the next bit of setup, which is a little less clear. So here, Andinster provides a wall, which funnels Pretty Prime in a direction. It narrows down his options a bit, which is some good setup. Walls are fantastic setup for cutting off options and really making it easier to land, especially those big circles. Lines a little less frequently, but the circles are really where it's at. But there was another bit of setup here that I really like to highlight and sets us up for the next clip, which is Pretty Prime, the way he's thinking is setting up for Stealth. Pretty Prime is all right, we just lost this team fight pretty hard. They got two. I need to disengage. Disengage translates to straight line towards our base. This provides Stealth with plenty of setup. It's basically the base is providing a taunt via the mentality of Pretty Prime here. And so Stealth just ults on that the appropriate side of the wall, what I call north side, towards the enemy base, so that Pretty Prime walks himself into Scylla ult. Now, on this last bit, Apollo ults in and he whiffs it because he doesn't wait for CC, but it's not super important that he whiffs it there because they're just going over and doing Gold Fury afterwards. So I'm going to move over to our next clip. This is one you might recognize if you followed Worlds last year. And I'm just going to let this clip play, and then I'll go ahead and talk about it.
That means Neil's stuck in the middle in trouble, and Sam for Sucker coming to collect. But Paul, is that a one-tap? Sam for Sucker is a distant memory find, okay? Gone as well. Pittsburgh Knights are on something different.
Paul's better. Paul's better. I don't care who you are.
Then everyone.
Paul's better.
Has to leave.
Yeah. That at Worlds, it's aggro statement rang true for a lot of people. Paul was on something different, and was just landing things that didn't seem consistent. Like, it didn't seem like anyone else should be consistent, like anyone should ever be consistent at landing it, but he was making it very consistent. And so let's look into what made this ult, what was the setup that made this ult consistent? Obviously, there was no CC from anyone, so it is going to be a mental thing. It's going to be Paul recognizing Sam for Soccer's mentality going into the fight and what he was focusing on in that instant, as well as a couple of like movement things and some recognitions there. So before this fight even started, an important thing to point out is Zap's beads and Aegis are down. So he's on Cupid. He just ulted in this fight, it seems, as you can see by the blue diamond. His beads and Aegis are down. He has no safety from Sam for Soccer on his own. Best thing he can do is just get a bit of damage in before he dies. If Sam for Soccer gets on top of him, Zap is done for, without assistance, of course. And so, Ghost Gaming, good on them. They recognize a really, really important thing to do to help them stay in this game. They've been in the lead. They're still in the lead, even though PK just stole Fire Giant. And then Zap, because Zap lost his actives on that Fire Giant fight, they are able to try to take advantage of that. If you take your enemy's ADC off the table during a Fire Giant push, they don't get anything without their ADC. Objectives go down too slowly, and the Ghost Gaming could probably have taken the rest of the T2s off the map if they trade out Sam for Zap. But PK goes a step further, and they say, we know you know Zap's actives are down and are going to try and focus him down. So we're going to sort of dangle him out as bait. And Paul's got so much damage, he can keep Zap safe, provided an potentially unexpected level of safety. So I'm going to run this a little bit. Sam blinked over the wall, and the first thing Paul and Zap did is separate. And the way that they separated forces Sam to only look at one of them. This provides an extra layer of setup, because in this instance, you, as the jungler, you want to look at both of them. You know sometimes you won't be able to, but you want to look at both of them so that when you are being targeted by the mage, you can react. And you can make that decision. But because of how Paul and Zapman positioned themselves in this split second, as Sam came over the wall, he's forced to look at only one of them. Paul takes that instance, recognizes he's only looking at Zap, and knows Sam is all in it. He has Magi's up, so Sikkim wouldn't have done anything but damage. And he really shouldn't have been that afraid of Paul. However, Paul already being in his ult, because he was looking for setup for landing on probably PBM. That was its own thing. But Paul's sitting in his ult already, and he's just going to drop that ult on top of Zapman, because as long as he drops it on top of Zapman, Sam's not killing Zap. And so Zapman turns around. It's really important. Zap gets a couple autos in. But Paul used the fact that Sam had to... Let me mute it real quick. Because Sam felt he had to be all-inning Zap here. Really crucial for this fight that Zap dies. If you don't kill the ADC with both actives, a Cupid with both actives down and no ult as a Susano, it's a rough time for you, your team. And so Sam is doing his job, but he's a little too dialed in. This is Worlds Finals. I think it was game 3. It was later in the set, which meant that the set is on the line. From game 3 on, the set was on the line for Ghost Gaming, and so Sam is feeling the pressure, and he's a little over dialed in on Zapman. So Paul takes a moment, starts to wind up, drops the circle. It's got Zapman, it's got Sam in it. If either of them don't move, it's a win for them. Soon as this ult it gets locked in place and starts going down, Zap gets one auto in, which does a sixth of Sam's health. A second one lands right as the Scylla ult's about to land. Now Zap does a good job here. He doesn't move too far away. It's really tempting to backpedal away from the Susano, but he recognizes his safety is in this Scylla ult, so he stops backpedaling, it seems. He might even start to take a step forward, which keeps Sam inside of the Scylla ult. This is a little bit of a mental setup thing, where Zap's intentionally dangling himself, knows that Paul's got the damage coming, and that's where this fight turns. And so Paul lands his ult. His ult killing Susano from 60%, not a surprise. Because the two autos lined up with the ult so cleanly, it looks like 100-0. I had to watch this back super slow in order to see that Zap did it. But this was a perfect coordination of Zap and Paul, which they did a lot over Worlds, to make a dive on one of them, typically on Zap, something that provided such good setup, it might as well have been an Athena taunt.